Hello, CompuMove friends. Welcome to a CompuMove training video. What we have for you today is a look at CompuMove's receipt posting functions. First, we'll take a look at posting a simple receipt for a local move. We'll look at a job with posted revenue and a receivable balance. We'll look at the job balances in history, and we'll look at the job invoice. Then we'll make a single receipt entry to pay that job. We'll look at the different ways to find the job by shipper name, by invoice number, and we'll apply payment to the job. And then we'll look at how that job shows the payment after it's been posted. Then we'll look at applying a single payment to more than one job. We'll do a split receipt between a local move job and a related storage job. Then we'll look at a group of customer account jobs, and we'll use TMM military shipments for that. Then finally, we'll look at a consolidated invoice like you'd have for a project move, where a multiple group of jobs are combined together onto a single invoice. Finally, we'll pull out all the stops and look at how to post a van line settlement receipt, where one payment's being applied to multiple jobs, job balances are being adjusted on the fly to match that settlement, and there's related deductions. Deductions for our company expenses, and deductions that are contractor charged items. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started. First thing we're going to do is take a look at posting a simple receipt for a local move. I've got a local move job record in front of me. If we go to the charge screen, you can see that charges have been extended to the revenue column. And you can see that because of that, we've got a receivable balance on this job. We can see the same thing if we look at the job journal history. There's the journal history of the individual line items that were posted and their resulting current balance due. We can also see that if we go to the billing screen, we can see that there's an invoice on the system. And if we open up that by double clicking it there or going to the documents menu and clicking it there, then we get the invoice that exists for this job in front of us. So that's what we're going to need for some background information. So now let's take a look at posting the receipt. So I'm going to get out of this job because it won't like me to own the record twice. It'll complain about that. So I'm going to go to Move Books, and I'm going to go to Receipt Post. And when I start a new receipt, I get this question. This is an important question. If you're consolidating deposits together, meaning you're taking a deposit slip to the bank with 10 checks on it, then when you do the very first check in that deposit slip, you're going to want to say new deposit, and then each subsequent entry is going to be an additional or existing deposit, and then it'll show you the running deposit total as you go, so that when you get to the end of your deposit slip, the deposit total that you've got in CompuMove is going to match what's at the bottom of your deposit slip. So I'm going to go ahead and say new deposit. I'm going to pick a posting date. I'll use today's date. That's fine. I'm going to go into received from. Now in this case, we're not going to say that this is any kind of an account move or anything like that. This is just an individual. So I'm going to say this was received from Dave Smith, and he paid me $1,088.60. And we'll say that he paid by check. So I'll go ahead and put the check number in there, and I'll describe that as a check. So this defines the money that we've got. If the job is short paid, if there's one payment being applied to multiple jobs, if this is a van line settlement, you don't take any of that into account at this step. What we want to know is how much money have we got and from who. Everything else comes later, so don't try to game the settlement at this stage. It'll just make trouble for you down the road. Now in this case, we have a simple situation in front of us, so it's going to be easy. One job, one payment, they match, there's no adjustment. So let's do that. I'm going to click on the job button, and now there's several ways to find this job. I could put in Smith, and up would come the shipper. Now I've got more than one person that has that name, so you could see that that might not work that well. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to put in the invoice number. So let me type in the invoice number as we see it here, which of course the party might have included on there, payment to us. And when I do that, then a single record's returned, and I know I found it. So what I'll do is I'll check the job off. And that's an important step, because if you're in a situation where a payment's being applied to more than one job, you need to be able to signal to the system which one. In this case, there's a single job record, and so I've checked it off, and so down here at the bottom, it shows me the selected total. So all I need to do then is click the button that says Apply as Paid, and it brings me back to the front posting screen, and I'm basically done except for hitting the Post Receipt button. You can see the amount that was received is shown here as a credit on the job. In this case, the job was paid in full, so we have no resulting balance. We've got a balanced transaction up here. Our debits equal our credits in terms of general ledger posting, and so the Post Receipt button is enabled. If you don't get to 0 up here, you won't be able to post down here. The system won't let you post a transaction that does not balance. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Post Receipt, and it's going to run the transaction. It's going to tell us it completed. It's going to give us an opportunity to carry on with a deposit, make the second entry, the third entry, the fourth entry of that deposit, or I could start a new deposit, or I could just be done. In this case, I'll say that I'm done. We'll let it close out. Now we'll open that job record up, and we'll pick the appropriate one. And then when we go to the job history, I'll go to the journal view. Now you can see a payment's been received and the balance is down to 0. And if you look on the home screen, down at the bottom, charges and credits, balance receivable shows 0. It shows you the very same thing at the bottom of the charges screen. So if we go there, you can see we've got company revenue, we've got credits, we've got a receivable balance of 0. And if we go and look at the billing history, we'll see now that this invoice is in paid status. So if you've got more than one invoice out, you can actually pick a particular one. If it's a multi-phase situation or you did a supplemental invoice or something, you'll actually be able to control which invoice gets applied paid on a job in that situation because you searched for it according to that invoice number. So this job is done. So now let's carry on and make it a little more complicated. Next, we'll take a look at applying a single payment to more than one job. And let's start with an example of a local move and a related storage job. So if I were to run the open receivables report, I would see that I had 2 jobs for that Dave Smith person. In this case, I've gone ahead and put an extra charge on that Dave Smith local move. Maybe it was for an extra service I provided, some material pickup, warehouse handling, whatever it might be. And then also under the regular storage job type, this person has now accrued 1 month's worth of storage. So in total, they owe us $450. And so let's take a payment from this person for $450 and let's split it between these 2 jobs. So I'm going to close out the open receivables report, go back to move books, go back to receipt post. In this case, I'm going to add that on top of the deposit I already had going. So the grand total will be all these numbers together. So I'm going to say existing deposit. It's Dave Smith again, and he gave us $450, and we say we've got a check number from him. And then I'm going to go to jobs, and I'm going to enter his name. Now this is the point at which we could actually do several different things. We could put in invoice numbers, we could put by job type, we could put by reference number, we could put by the bill to account, variety of things to do. I'm going to take the simple course right now. And so what happens is I get 2 job records back. One has a $200 balance, one has a $250 balance. So I'm going to select them both. I'm going to double click on this one. I'm going to double click on that one. And then you can see down at the bottom, my selected total, which is the sum of these, is set for $450. So I'm going to say apply full pay because I don't want the $450 to be applied to either one of the jobs. I want to spread it. So I'm going to say apply full pay. And then that brings each job down to 0. So I've got 2 credits. I've got 2 jobs paid in full. I've got $450 coming in. My applied to balance is 0, and so I'm going to be able to post my receipt. So let's go ahead and do it. So I'll say post receipt. It processes the transaction and it says that it's done. So next let's do a very similar thing, except we're going to use a customer account to apply one payment to multiple jobs. So if I go to Move Books and I go to Customers and I go to Total Move Management, you can see I've got 3 records with outstanding receivable balances, all charged to TMM. If you're not familiar with the Military Moving Universe, TMM is a carrier that is in common use. A lot of people are going to have jobs for them. So what we're interested in doing is getting a payment from TMM and having it be applied to all of these jobs. So in order to do that, let's go back to Move Books and let's go to Receipt Post. And we can continue to add on to this existing deposit. You can see at this point I've got a deposit that's going that has a running total. So if I want to know what's on that deposit so far, if I click on Deposit History, it will actually show me I've got a $1,538.60 total deposit going, and that is 2 different checks from Dave Smith. Obviously, it shows me the balance there and how they add up to that. So this will just keep growing as I keep adding on to this deposit, and then ultimately I'll be able to look at the deposit total and it will foot out to what's on my deposit slip. So in this case, I'm going to say TMM is my source, and they've paid me $38,215.52. And maybe I've got a check number. Now, if I got this as a wire transfer from TMM, I do not want to add this onto an existing deposit with checks. You've got to keep your receipts of different kinds separate so that when you go to reconcile your bank account, it'll make sense. Otherwise, it'll be impossible. So in this case, I'm going to say I got a check. I don't think TMM actually commonly pays that way, but just for the sake of explanation, we'll say that that's the case. So I'm going to click on Jobs, and then I'm going to go to the Bill To, and I'm going to pick TMM, and those 3 jobs come up, and I can click on all 3 of them, and then I can say Apply Full Pay, and now I've got a situation where they paid my invoices in full, so I don't have any leftover money. There's what they gave me as their receipt, my debits and credits balance, because I've applied the credits to the job. So this is exactly the same as taking that check and splitting it between the person's local move and storage job, except that I found these job records by looking them up by customer account. So now I can go ahead and post this receipt. All the rest will happen as before, and I'll be good to go. But we're not actually going to do that because we're interested in something else. So I'm going to say cancel post, and I'm going to do cancel post. And then we're going to go back to Move Books, and we're going to look at a situation with a consolidated invoice where 2 jobs were added together onto the same invoice. There's a video for how to create a consolidated invoice. I'm not going to cover that right now. But if you look at the invoices register, you can see 2 of those TMM jobs were combined together on a single invoice. There's the invoice number right there. So what will happen is if I put that invoice number in, both jobs are going to come back. So let's take a look at what would happen there. So I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to go back to Receipt Post, and I'll just keep adding on to that deposit that I've got. So I'm going to say Existing Deposit. I'm going to say TMM, and in this case, they paid me $25,964.34, and then they gave me a number. And now when I go to Jobs and I enter the invoice number, which in this case was 2109-8, then it's going to bring both records that come back from that shared invoice. So there's a variety of scenarios where this might be the case. Certainly if you're doing project work or a lot of commercial work, you'll bill at the end of the week or something like that for all the work you did during the week. So this would be a classic example of now they're paying you for it. But you've got multiple days or multiple bills of lading or multiple phases of the project. And so you've got to make sure that that payment gets spread across those individual job records so each one shows paid in full, even though they were combined together on the same invoice. So I'm going to double click that one. I'm going to double click that one. I get my total down at the bottom. I'm going to say Apply Full Pay. Now I've got a balance transaction. Now I can go ahead and post it. So now the final and certainly most complicated thing to try here is to do a van line settlement. In this case, we're going to start in a similar way. We're going to have multiple jobs that get payment from the van line receipt, but there's going to be deductions taken out. And there's also going to be adjustments to the job, because if you're an agent for a van line, you know they never pay you what you're expecting to get. And so we're going to have to take that into account as we go so that we don't have leftover balances. So let's get started with that by looking at what the van line owes us. So I'm going to go back to Move Books, and I'm going to go to Customers, and I'm going to double click on My Van Line. And you can see I've got two jobs out here, Roger Jones and Walt O'Reilly. Two balances due. So now I've received payment from the van line, but they're not going to pay me the full amount that they owe me. They're going to pay me a lesser number. And it's going to net out against these two jobs because they're going to short pay one of the jobs, which we're going to adjust for. And then they're also going to charge me for two either related or possibly completely unrelated chargebacks, one of which I'm going to take as my company expense and one of which I'm going to post through to an independent contractor. So let's take a look at how we would post that. We'll go to Move Books, we'll go to Receipt Post. We'll say we're starting a new deposit because this is probably an EFT transfer. I'm going to say received from My Van Line. And then I guess we should fix that. My Van Line. And the amount that they paid us was $15,665.40. And there can be a wire transfer number. I'll go ahead and put EFT in there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the jobs. I'm going to open the job record. I'm going to pull down My Van Line, and then up come the two jobs that I'm interested in. Now I'm looking at my van line settlement, and I see that they paid that job in full, but they short paid me $100 on that job. They probably had their reasons. We're not going to get into that right now. But what we want to do is we want to adjust that job right now before we apply payment for it so we don't have a leftover balance to deal with later. Now that is, of course, a judgment call. If they haven't paid you for the unpacking, for example, then you wouldn't just zero that out. You'd let it ride as a receivable, and very possibly you'd generate a follow-on supplemental invoice just for that service. But in this case, we're going to say they did their typical van line recalculations, and they decide that we're not actually due what we thought we were, and so we're going to accept that in this case. We're not going to fight them over the $100, so let's make that adjustment. So I'm going to sit on the job I want to adjust, and I'm going to click the Open Job button. And what that does is bring the job record up in front of me. I'm going to go to the charge screen. Now I could adjust individual line items, which might certainly be appropriate. Let's go ahead and take that commission that we got for packing, and let's just reduce it by $100. So instead of $47.94, it's going to be $46.94. So I'm going to say $46.94 and 69 cents. Of course, it never works out to those nice round numbers, but just to make this a little easier to follow, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So now if I go ahead and save that no exit and look at the journal history, you can see I've got a minus $100 line item there for the full packing. So now that I've adjusted my job to match what they've paid me, now when I double click on this item, you'll see that value will change. It'll go from 7,300 to 7,200, and I'm going to do the same thing for the Roger Jones job. So I've got two jobs selected, which total up to $17,165. So let's go ahead and apply full pay on those. So now you can see that we've got an imbalance. They didn't actually give us that much money. They gave us a lesser amount. And in fact, they gave us exactly $1,500 less. I arranged that just to make this example easier to follow. So let's figure out what's going to happen next. They've done two deductions on this settlement. One is a company expense that we're going to take. The other is a deduction that we're going to pass through to an independent contractor. So first, let's take our company expense. I'm going to go to General. I'm going to come down and pick the claims expense account. Now, if I was using the claims management system, I might well be applying that to a claim item that exists, but I'm just going to simplify this for that moment, and I'm just going to go and do a shipper name. And so suppose this is Sally Jones. So it doesn't have to be a a claim relating to a shipment that's on this settlement. This could have been a shipment we did 6 months ago. So once I've put in my description item, maybe there would be some kind of carrier registration number, then I'm going to say I want to make a new item in this account. I'm not looking for something that's already here. This is something that's coming at me new. It's a deduction off a settlement. So when I do that, the system is ever hopeful that you're done with this transaction, and so it's going to automatically put whatever the outstanding balance is into one of these added on line items. If there's only one item, or this is the last item, then that's great. But in this case, that's not the case. So I'm going to say that they charged us $500 back for this particular claim activity. So now if you look at it, we still received the original amount, but now we've only got $1,000 left to balance because these two are netting against what they paid. So we could do that with another line item. We could take Van Line Co-op advertising. We could have bought uniforms, all those sort of things that they might charge us for. But in this case, we've got an expense. Maybe it's a truck lease. Maybe it's training, drug testing, who knows what, that we're going to apply to an independent contractor. So I go to the commission account and I pull down my list of contractors and I take Smith Trucking. And then I can go ahead and make myself a description. So let's go ahead and say truck lease plus uniforms or something like that. And then let's say we're going to make a new item. So now we've got a balanced transaction. Now we've got the receipt that we received. We got the two jobs that got paid. We got $500 deducted that we're taking as company expense. And we got $1,000 deducted that we're going to pass through to our independent contractor. It's going to come out of his future settlement. It is not going to go on our profit and loss. It is not going to go on our income statement because we're going to deduct it from him in the future. But accounting for that as this goes on is essential because that's the nature of a van line settlement. You've got debits and credits. They net it out to what they give you, and then you have a balanced transaction that you can post. So I can go ahead and say post receipt. The transaction processes. Now, if I were to open up those jobs and look at their history, I would see that there. If I were to open up the expense account and look in there, I'd see that I posted a claim expense. If I were to open up my independent contractor's account and look in there, you'd see that I had a negative item in there waiting for his next settlement. So those are all subjects of interest, but not the subject of this video. So we're going to stop right now. I think it's a pretty comprehensive look at how to apply payment for a job. As always, if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and thanks for watching.